Go talk to every frontline employee in sales,
Yeah.
in customer success. Talk to them for 30 minutes each. Every person, 30 minutes one-on-one. Document every single pain point they're bringing up.
How did you get into RevOps? And of course, I could read off your LinkedIn, but that's a bit boring for everyone. So what's your version of the story?
Yeah, super.
Yeah.
Good version of the story. The fast, went to school at Texas A&M. I was third generation, so I was either going to go to Texas A&M or Texas A&M. So I chose Texas A&M. It's where my folks went, my grandparents as well. Like most Texans, started working in oil and gas, but I was in an interesting field. I was in data analytics within oil and gas. So this is really when refineries, gas transmission sites started to use computing, so SCADA systems, otherwise, to monitor and figure out what was going on. So heavily operations based environment. Moved from that into KPMG, one of the big four accounting firms, offices in London. I'm sure you know them. Worked in IT advisory, so predominantly within telcos, large Fortune 5s, et cetera. Knew I wanted to do something different, and so joined an early stage startup called 5 Stars, and originally came to be everything back office, so people ops, product analytics, sales ops, HR, finance, all of that rolled up underneath me. So it was basically the first back office hire. Started to scale that, implemented Salesforce, implemented a billing system. And that's really, I think, where I found the power of systems. So it was very early on Zuora, probably one of the first 30 customers to deploy that system. Fixed huge billing issues. We had done the whole build our billing system in-house, and it was a contentious conversation with our CEO. If he was like, "You've got to stake your professional reputation. This is going to increase our billing." And so we put that in, almost doubled our collection rate. We just had such broken processes because our development team built a billing system instead of the core product, which was a loyalty and marketing automation product, and you don't necessarily want to do that. In that phase of growth, not uncommon to see VPs of sales come in and out. So we had lost our VP of sales, and our sales team was about 50 people. So really where I started to get heavily involved in RevOps, and I think this is one of the core tenets, is you've got to be an expert somewhere. I took over our sales team. So it was a 3-month handshake of, sure, I'll do this for 3 months. Really did not want to probably run the sales team much longer than that. 3 months turned into almost 4 years. And so I grew and scaled that sales team from 50 down to 20, and then from 20 scaled it and built it back up to about 250 people at peak, both inside sales, outside sales, SDR, and enterprise. Also retained sales ops at that time. Obviously in that growth curve, right, I'm shelling away finance, I'm shelling away HR. You can't do that many things. It's not feasible. Took us through 2 rounds of funding, Series B of about 30 million, a Series C of about 50 million as the head of sales. And then after that, really started dialogue with the CEO of, I don't really want to run the sales team. It's not really what I want to do. I want to go back to core, what we would consider RevOps. So came out of the VP sales position, became SVP of business operations, and we really just created a super group, consolidated product analytics, data science, data engineering, which gave us full access to the production environment. How are customers actually interfacing with our product? Merged it over with a bunch of work on FP&A, sales ops, customer success ops, built a call center analytics, all sorts of things, and basically unified the whole system together. And so did that for about the last 3 years at 5 Stars, and then came over to Checker. So Checker's done very well. Same type of vision here, really the great unification, the great understanding of what is going on. And so today I'm running marketing operations, customer success ops, and then all the core sales ops functions, and working really heavily with the channel teams and production engineering directly to try to figure out how do we get source of truth. So that's sort of the path there. But I think within RevOps, what you generally want to see is someone that has deep expertise, deep understanding in one of those core fields. So for me, I think having run the sales team for so long, I understand sales. You need to understand your stakeholders. You need to have empathy. You need to understand what they're going through. And there's no better way to have that experience than actually having done the function. So in terms of what is the path to RevOps, what is the path to doing it, what I advise anybody is figure out your forte, gain leadership experience, go up the ranks, and it can be marketing, sales, or customer success. You'll flatten out, but you need to have one of those that is your core forte.
Yeah, okay, this is great. I mean, that last point you made is a really important one. It's about the empathy and it's about the people, because we do find that at the top level, RevOps is a very human sport. So expanding what you've just mentioned, what are some of the fundamental ways we can drive communication between revenue teams?
Yeah, this is the stuff that's so interesting to me at companies. it's not it's not doing something so unique or so novel that no one's ever done it before. Sometimes it's just the basics, you know. So one of the first projects I had the enablement team go work on it and spin up and do, and we've just gotten the results on it, is go talk to every frontline employee in sales, in customer success. Talk to them for 30 minutes each. Every person, 30 minutes one-on-one. Document every single pain point they're bringing up. So we did that exercise, you know, and we found all of the training insights. 80% of people, right, 32 out of 40 more or less, basically said, hey, the training is not tactical enough. It's too high level. It's not applicable. I don't understand. It's great we're talking about it. It's great we're training. It's not real. It doesn't help me do my job. Awesome feedback, right? It's really about just doing those things. And so the first step to having a relationship, right, is first I have to have just like a basic identity with you. Who are you? What do you do? I need to understand you personally. What drives you? What motivates you? What are your triggers? What works well? How do I communicate with you? There's a difference between good communication and bad communication, and every person's different. And then I think the layer below that is really, what are your needs? Where can we help you? And it's about being seen as an ally, being seen as someone that's there to help you, not as someone that's there to condemn you. I think that's 3. And then the 4th point I'll just touch on really quickly is, it's very, very easy to find problems. Okay. Finding problems is not that hard. You can go into almost any company as a consultant and find thousands of problems. The question is, how good are you at fixing them? And I think that that is the core edict with RevOps that I constantly talk about with everyone on my team is, that's great you found something. Let's go fix that thing. Don't move off it until it's fixed. Don't halfway fix it. Don't 2/3 fix it. Don't 1/4 fix it. Fix it the whole way. And that's, I think, when you can establish that relationship with a stakeholder of, I can see you, I understand you, I know your problem, and I will work until your problem is solved, or we'll have a debate that I don't think I can solve your problem if we need to. But if you take that level of seriousness in the conversations, that's what leads, in my opinion, to really good stakeholder management.
Okay, this is fantastic. Now, you touched on a point there that is in line with our other theme of conversation, which is rep adoption of new processes. And you said part of your work is to go and speak to people. I'm assuming that includes reps and what their issues are, so you can be seen as an ally. And that last word is the crucial piece, because when we're getting reps to adopt new processes, sometimes we're seen as a hindrance. So how do you go about achieving allyship? How do you go about achieving being seen as someone who is useful for reps?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the number one thing is, you cannot get defensive. Take feedback for what it is. It's feedback, right? I've seen so many people fail where they're trying to push something out because they like it and they think it might be objectively good, but the reps are resistant and don't want to do it. One of the first things we've done at Checker, which has been interesting, is we've pulled out software. I've ripped software out. I believe in half-baked installations are bad. Half-baked rollouts are bad. So really what you're trying to find is uniformity of process, and either something is objectively better for the AEs or it's objectively worse. And that's same for SDR, same for CS. It either is better or it's worse. If it's better, you got to show them that it's better. We've got to talk about why it's better. But if you think it's better and the AEs think it's not, there is a massive disconnect going on somewhere. And again, this is no longer a technical battle at that point. This is a emotional battle. This is a understanding battle of, why do I think, from when I'm looking at the numbers, this is good for you, this tool is good for you, whether it's outreach, whether it's Gong, Chorus, you know, Discover Org, doesn't matter. What is the tool? But if I think it's good and you don't, all of my time and energy should be focused on one thing, figuring out where that gap is. And what you'll find a lot of times is inefficient training, wasn't rolled out correctly, lack of understanding, thinking we're just tracking for the sake of tracking instead of understanding there's something behind it. But again, it's all about that connection. So if you're emotionally distant from the teams, I think you're guaranteed to fail in RevOps. It doesn't do any good to edict a software package and push it down. That does nothing for anybody. And you lose what you really need to hear, which is, who's the customer? The customer of RevOps is customer success. The customer of RevOps is sales. The customer of RevOps is marketing.
Yeah. Okay. So the interesting piece here, Matt, is we're combining, aren't we, the data and almost the art or the human understanding of what's going on. Now, in RevOps, we often have a clear indication from the data for what we should do or what the narrative is. And obviously, the human piece can often have a different interpretation. That's what you've just outlined. So I just wondered from you how you combine these two approaches to be effective, and how do you overcome discrepancies between when the data has a different interpretation of events from the people? I mean, what do you do as a RevOps person?
I think the first thing is, you know, you've got to be paranoid about the data, and you may not have the full picture. So this is just an interesting kind of thought experiment. If I'm in RevOps and I have all the access to the data and I've got smart analysts, who then will challenge me? Nobody. So what's the edict and what is my responsibility, especially leading a revenue operations org? It's to make sure the data is complete. It's to make sure it's accurate, and it's to understand where the holes are in the data. Again, I think it goes back to the same thing. If I'm seeing a compelling story in the data, I've seen it go two ways. I've had compelling data narratives and I roll them out to the field and I roll them out to the sales management teams or the customer success management teams. They're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is exactly what we're seeing. This is exactly what we're faced with. You're dead on. I've had that experience. I've also had the experience of pushing something out and they're like, no, this is wrong. You're missing something. It's that second part that you've got to pay very close attention to. That doesn't mean that you're wrong, but that means there's likely a gap of understanding and a gap of what's going on and a gap of, something's missing. So really, I think to me, it's about two things. Number one is completeness. Do you understand where the holes are in your data? Do you understand the pieces you're not seeing? That's a really important part, is the completeness of the picture. And then the second part is really, again, open to interpretation. Some things are infallible. Some things are universally true, statistically so significant that it would be very unlikely it's anything else other than the truth. Others are not. And so I think it's about really just holding yourself to that standard. And again, communications are very important. When you lay out information, it's important to lay out information in a way that is accurate and complete. And it's to lay things out in a way that says, this is what I'm seeing, but here are the limitations to the data set. I'm seeing 20 accounts, it's small sample. You say that. You talk about where the incomplete picture is, and you have to hold yourself to a standard of completeness and a standard of, judicial fairness. And it's hard to do that.
Yeah, well, okay. Speaking of visibility then, how can, or to what extent really, can silo leaders see into each other's funnels? How does it work?
It's very difficult. So I think the first step in the process is, I have a couple of advice for RevOps teams and anybody that's an analyst. Number one is I have this term I like to use, which is called a single point deliverable. Don't build things that are a one-time asset. Almost guaranteed if you're building a one-time asset, you're building it incorrectly. So I think the first part is, let's imagine just a simple ecosystem. Let's imagine there's a Salesforce ecosystem, a production database, a billing system, and maybe a support system, whether it's Salesforce cases, Zendesk or something, right? Simple, just 4 systems, and maybe a marketing automation platform, Pardot, Marketo, HubSpot. Let's imagine that's just the world. The first step is, how do I work in a single system architecture? How do I extract all of the relevant information that's important for all revenue stakeholders from each of those systems? And let's just not make it too complicated. Marketing automation, what's important? What are the number of engagements we're generating? What are the campaigns we're sending? What's the MQL rates? What are the response rates? And how many opportunities are we able to send to sales? How many leads are we able to send to sales? Really nailing those funnels and having it very visible. That should be in your weekly deck. And honestly, it should be refreshed almost nightly, if not weekly, weekly, if not nightly. That's the first one. Sales, right? What is the point of Salesforce? It's all about the sales funnel. Can you perfect, once a lead comes in, number one, that you know where it came from? This is the first data stitching between Salesforce and the marketing automation. Where did this come from? Then after that, it's all the sales activity. What did we do to mature this lead? How did we advance it through the funnel? What's the value of it? And then demographic information, firmographic information that might be useful down the road. What industry is it? What's the persona of the buyer? All of these things you want to enrich, but still you can do that single system architecture. Let's really nail the sales cycle. Customer support. Where do our customers come from? What's the size of the customer that's inbounding? Do we have a propensity for certain customers on certain products to inbound more often to us or request support? Where are the gaps? Again, single system architecture. And then, your billing system. Who's not paying us? Why are they not paying us? Is there something there? Single system architecture. You can get very far with that. And I would just think about one of the first things is build a core reporting framework that will show you all of that. There's a common framework that was used at Zora called Padre, which I actually quite like, which is about pipeline, Padre, pipeline, which is all of the marketing information, acquisition, all of your sales information, deploy, how are you launching your customers, retention, how well are you retaining them, and expansion, what's your upsell motion look like? So you can think about first step, nailing all of those funnels. That's your first V1 weekly business report. Hey, all, here's what's happening in the business in all of our siloed systems. From there, that's the foundation you need to build what companies really do need to get to, which is how do I now stitch this together to where when I'm looking at billing, I know what lead source you came from in marketing, and we've tied the whole thing together. And that part can take years. to do really well, to do excellently. But that's the way to think about it, I think, from a RevOps side. And those core reports, it's really about nailing those core functions. And most companies, especially in SaaS, are very similar. Always nuance, always differences, but very similar in terms of what you want to see.
Yeah, okay, this is fantastic. Now, if we're expanding this idea of the ecosystem you mentioned, now let's think of like an organizational ecosystem. In ecosystems, every animal has a part to play in the ecosystem and keeping it going. So in an organizational ecosystem, what responsibilities do different silo leaders share? And if they don't share responsibilities, what the common goals that they should, and what should the common goals look like, really?
Yeah, on go-to-market, it's interesting. I think go-to-market, also I'll talk about purely revenue teams. I think number one goal is alignment. What are we going after? And then number two, it's showing progress against that alignment. So from a marketing perspective, we can go through them really quick. Marketing is responsible for generating leads at the right lead source at an acceptable ROI, right? They've got to be able to show that the dollars they're spending are generating the types of customers we want with an acceptable hurdle of financial performance. Sales, same thing. It's about showing that you can constantly improve your win rates. You can learn from the losses, you can learn from the wins. That should be informing two things. One, your targeting model. Who are we going after? And two, your collateral, your assets, your training materials. How do we win better against it? And then probably third derivative from that is pricing. Are we priced competitively? Is our pricing strategy appropriate? That's that sales motion. The customer success motion. What makes a good customer? What makes a bad customer? I've been in business models, by the way, where we can acquire companies at the exact same rates, but the ones that churn are specific industries. And it could be those industries have higher out of business rates. It could be those industries just have less performance. So 5-stars, for example, marketing automation and loyalty program. The businesses, the industries that work the best are those with repeat traffic. Of course, that makes sense, right? Think of buy 10, get one free. Imagine I sell you in your bowling alley. Gosh, I got to go a lot of times to get that free bowl. And it's like, how many people really go bowling 10 times a year? Probably a very small minority. But think about a restaurant, right? Close to the office when we weren't in COVID, you tend to go to the same restaurants constantly. So what we would see is I can acquire bowling alleys at the same rate as I can acquire a coffee shop. But when we get a coffee shop, they stay on the platform. The revenue performance is superior. That's a lot of what customer success, your save desk, your churn teams need to be looking at. What performs best? That then again feeds back to the alignment of, hey, marketing, all dollars set equal, a dollar spent to acquire a coffee company is better than a dollar spent to acquire a bowling alley. How do we target more of those? Again, targeting models. And then there's the financial performance on the back end, right? Of, compensation models, how we're paying people, acceptable ROIs, and constantly tuning and tinkering this. So you could think about those as an example, but the core goal is all of the teams to work together towards a common goal, to be on the same page, and to understand that every team has unique data points that are relevant and impact everybody else. And if you don't find those, surface those, discover those, you will never tune and hone your revenue organization as to be best in class. You'll never do what the company is capable of doing if you don't build a completeness picture.
Yeah. Okay. I love what you're speaking about here, because what we're going on to is the difference between tactical and strategic operations. And that's essentially everything you've outlined there. I would really place in the strategic operations camp. Now, I just wondered what your philosophy and view on this generally was. I mean, like I said, we're seeing that increasing numbers of sales ops and RevOps folks are becoming more strategic. And that's where lots of people want to end up in their organization. What's your philosophy on this? I mean, why is it important? Is it important? Where should RevOps and sales ops lie in the tactical versus strategic debate?
I think they're both. I think they're highly tactical and highly strategic. And I think it takes both, right? A good strategy needs excellent execution. So you have to do both, right? Getting the insight is one piece of the puzzle. That's what you're talking about, the strategy. A lot of strategy work is, what are the insights in the business that make a big difference for us? What can change the trajectory of the company today? That's the strategy piece. A lot of people want to skip, I think, I found this, I guess, in my career, and I probably felt it maybe earlier on in my career. You want to jump to the strategy stuff. I'll tell you, even as much quote unquote strategy work as I do, there is no substitute for getting into the tactical, getting into the day-to-day, and making sure you're running really tight operations and making sure things are humming correctly. That is a tremendous amount of work. You're not really, I think, going to be able to succeed in a pure strategy role if you're so far away from the tactical that you don't see what's going on. Because again, there's two elements of what you can do, right? There's operational efficiency through the cycle. How do we make things better? And then there's insights that you have to generate. knowing where to look, knowing where the insights are, comes from being closer to the field, comes from being closer to the marketplace, comes from being closer to that in a lot of cases. And there's a ton of really good information to be mined there. So it's doing both. It's not getting so far away, but it's also being far enough away to see the forest through the trees. It's a tricky balance. Yeah.
It is a tricky balance. And notoriously, one of the difficult things in ops is the amount of pressures on your time. And when you're balancing strategic and tactical ops, I can imagine that can be a large factor in this. And now, one of the things that's supposed to help us in our roles with time is tech. And you mentioned it earlier, but I really want to dig into this in more detail. Your philosophy and approach on tech stacks and how they can help us do our job, but also what questions can't tech answer that you just need to be a great ops pro to do yourself?
Okay, good question. So in terms of how to adopt and purchase technology, I think when I've seen it not go well, the way it tends to not go well is somebody gets an exciting demo for something that they think is super cool and they want to try it at their company.
Yeah.
Stop. Don't do that. Right. What I try to do with the teams, and I'm about to do it. It's actually today. We're having this offsite this afternoon, but I try to come together with the whole team once a quarter and we build our epics. We go through all of the things we've learned through the prior quarter and we figure out what do we want to solve this quarter, and we try to stay super focused on delivering. Remember the whole point about execution. You got to delivering against the big epics. So when you're delivering against the big epics, I would almost say if your software evaluation process is not stemming from here are the epics we want to attack, here are the major problems, and then the next step past that could be what software could we use to expedite or improve one of these epics, that is the appropriate approach. If your approach to purchasing, procuring software is, oh, I've got this need today and someone complained about this thing, or I was at this demo, or my friend said I should use this, or somebody said this is really cool, that is where I think you're guaranteed to fail, or you're going to have a hard time. So I think so much about it is the process of the approach. What are the goals? What are the epics? What are you trying to accomplish? And is there software that can expedite it? If there is, go do it. So core tenet, I believe this very much. Don't spend a bunch of time building something that's already been built that you can procure pretty cheaply. Okay, so a good example of that would be like Drift or marketing automation, round robining systems, distribution engines. Don't go build those. It's a ton of development effort. You have to maintain it. People can do it, and it's very inexpensive. And there's great companies like Chili Piper, Drift, et cetera, that can nail that stuff. In terms of the technical skills and where to build, really, I think the core skill set on RevOps is likely SQL and learning how to do API calls. It's really about stitching the information together from system to system. And why that's actually a lot more difficult than might meet the eye is that every system has core limitations. Salesforce, good example. One of the core limitations, it's a point-in-time system, right? If I have a bunch of opportunity owners and then I go overwrite the names, I lose that history. So how do you bypass that? How do you bypass that limitation? Salesforce, you need to extract out. You need to save basically versions of it, whether you do it on a nightly cron job or you run backups on it. But you have to have your history tracking. You have to be able to see. Yeah. So that's really, I think, where RevOps has to focus on the technology and the tooling is how do I get source of truth comprehensively? And then also, how do I make sure these data models between systems can merge correctly? So it's doing both of those, but yeah, it's different for every company. But I would say so much of it is don't just purchase software to purchase software. It should be for a reason. It should be for an intent. It should not be last minute.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Avoid that Black Friday feeling that we all get on Amazon when we see a discount and think it might be an exciting thing to use. But you also raise a really good question there for anyone in tech in the RevOps space, which is, merging the different pieces of technology is so current now because this role has encompassed so many different functions, right? And there isn't really a piece of technology that can do all of the things that a RevOps person needs to do. It requires you to be experts in so many different things. Do you see the role of tech being increasing specialization and the role of RevOps people to have an understanding of the broad landscape? Or do you think there will emerge tools that will encompass lots of different things, like from the marketing to the sales funnel?
I mean, there are a lot of tools that are trying to do this. It is very arduous, and it's because a lot of these it's the good and the bad. A lot of these software packages, Salesforce, Zendesk, etc., they're highly customizable. So the challenge of a master tool, right, that you could put on top that would stitch it all together, I've seen a lot of people attack this problem and really struggle with it. I think it will eventually be done. I think whoever solves that problem is going to have a really amazing, successful business. I think what I can see in front of me, maybe the next 2-3 years, I think humans are really bad about predicting the future, but next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I imagine that really learning how to connect systems yourself and understand your own company's special use cases, where's your own company's complexity, and learning how to make views that make sense of that, given that complexity and that uniqueness that every company does have, is still going to be a core skill set that technical assets on the RevOps team are going to have to continue to develop and push into.